my presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing.
Kamala Harris's presidency would be different from Joe Biden's because she loves Republicans and big business way more. I don't know if that's the right message, but that is the message that she was sending during today's interview with Bret Baier on Fox News. And I want to give her credit for being willing to go into what should be considered a hostile territory and making a case for herself in this election. Now, Harris did sit down with the chief political anchor, Bret Baier, today for her first formal Fox News appearance. And she did not position herself to the left of Joe Biden. I want to be clear about that. And I'm not surprised, considering she has really been trying to present herself as a more moderate Democrat. And she leaned all the way into running to the right of the current president. So, John, before I get to the highlights and the clips, am I being unfair? By the way, can people just acknowledge that I want her to run on, especially on economic issues, to the left of Biden, which isn't really the sign of a Republican voter. Just want to put that out there. But nonetheless, like sometimes I'm worried that I'm being a little too unfair to Kamala or too critical, because people tend to be more critical of the party that they're closest to, right? What do you think?
I wonder about that. I feel like we come across a lot of people that have complete blinders to their own side. I think one of the reasons TYT has stood out is a willingness to be critical of both sides in some period. Well, basically whoever's in power. No, I don't think that you're necessarily being too critical. I mean, I try to maybe to maintain my sanity. I try to simultaneously consider all of the potential reasons that she would be doing this, because what you just showed fits into a genre of things she's said and done that we don't like. You talked earlier about like hey, Liz Cheney likes me, and oh, Dick Cheney, and it's like, oh, that makes us sick. And then you have this, it's this, and I'm gonna have a council of Republicans, and I'm gonna do all that. I'm gonna put someone on my cabinet, all this stuff that Republicans would literally never do. So she could potentially be doing it because she thinks that there are people that think bipartisanship harkens back to a bygone era before Trump, and maybe they'll find that appealing. She could be doing it because she thinks some Republicans who don't love Trump, this might make it more palatable to cross over and support her. And there is some polling evidence that over the past month, she has actually drawn like 4 to 6% more Republicans. It could also be, and I think this is probably the reason you are critical and that we might be critical of her, that we think it accurately reflects how she might rule as president. If she's doing that stuff to get elected and then she immediately tells them to go kick political rocks afterward, then kudos, fine, I love that. The issue is that the last couple of Democratic presidents have not, they haven't trained us to think that the Democrat is likely to be way more progressive as president than they were as candidate. It usually goes the opposite direction.
Right.
And so I think it's probably a mix of those three, but there's probably too much of that final category for either you or I.
Yeah, and for me, the main indicator is how the campaign was funded, because you're not gonna have billionaire donors bundling tens of millions of dollars in campaign donations for a candidate without expecting something in return. And so I think that unfortunately, to some extent, that money has already had an impact on or influence on the messaging she's putting out in this campaign. So we'll get to all of that. But first, I want to start with one of the more contentious issues, and that is the topic of immigration. Let's take a look.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration, because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have, and you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you
now,
just a number? Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Bret, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. Looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to citizenship for the. Yes, ma'am.
May I finish responding, please? But you have to let me finish.
You had the White House and the House and the Senate, and they didn't bring up that bill.
I'm responding to the point you're raising, and I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
He should let her finish. I mean, come on. I mean, if you want to push back after she finishes answering your questions, great. That's what you should do. But he's not even letting her finish her point.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, that is incredibly frustrating. So he might actually think that he's helping Trump by doing that, but he's just coming across as someone who's like afraid to hear her answer. To me, at least. Like, let her talk.
I think that there's a good chance that many Fox viewers might like it. They want her to be, attacked or whatever. A lot of them, by the way, were very critical of Bret Baier for being willing to do this. He was responding this week to all the theories that he was only doing this to prop her up or get her elected. Like right-wingers were just turning on him.
My God,
we often say that interviewers, debate moderators should not allow them to just filibuster. Like if Ted Cruz is being asked, or not Ted Cruz, JD Vance, same thing. JD Vance, did Trump win or lose 2020? And he goes off and says, well, I'm looking forward and I'm doing that. You're not answering the question. We should cut you off. He asked her, do you regret not doing X? And she responded by talking about all of the things they immediately did. That is an answer to the question. It may not be a direct yes or no answer, but she is providing information about what he asked about. And he's just cutting her off before she can do that. So I think this falls on the wrong side of that line of them needing to sort of like put pressure on the people they're talking to.
Now he goes on to ask about a specific tragic incident that occurred involving an undocumented immigrant. Let's take a look.
Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur.
I gotta say, given how difficult that question was, I think she handled it about as well as she possibly could. That's my take on it. What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's tough because on the one hand, the way American politics works, you're trying to take very complex issues that take place over the course of years and have a million different aspects over the course of an entire country of 300 plus million people, and trying to find specific things that we can all agree on, like this person murdered someone and that's bad. And the way American media works, you go for those specific cases and use them. So to some extent, it's fair to do that. But when you step back and look at what they're doing, so is the standard that we can have immigration so long as no crimes are ever committed? That's insane. That's insane. The idea that nobody was murdered under Trump. Like what again, what game are we playing here? Like, it's a massive country with massive borders and complex systems, some of it federal, some of it state, some of it local. To say that, like, well, I guess you shouldn't be president because a person was murdered. I mean, you were only VP, you weren't even in charge, but I guess that doesn't make sense. That's absolutely nonsensical. But I understand why they would use that as an attack line. I think it's effective.
I actually want to comment on that as well. Look, I do think that the issue of immigration, and it's not just me thinking it, it's based on every single election-related poll that asks for voters to state like what their priorities are policy-wise. I think the immigration issue is huge, and I do think that it's hurting the Democratic Party. I think that the Biden administration should have been far more willing to implement the executive order that Biden has recently implemented, because it did slow things down at the border considerably. I get what he was trying to do in accomplishing actual legislation, because legislation is much harder to reverse compared to an executive order, which is currently being challenged in the courts and could be reversed. And so I think that Biden needed to be a lot quicker and a little more on his feet on this issue. And it is impacting Democrats electorally. But with that all in mind, I do think she handled that incredibly difficult question really well. She didn't downplay these tragic events, and I'm happy to see she handled it the way that she did. But it is what it is. I think immigration is a topic that Republicans have realized they could really seize upon in order to hurt the Democrats electorally. And we'll see how that plays out. I want to move on real quick to the economy. Let's go to the highlight featuring that part of the discussion.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as president of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page.
I don't know what that means. Turn the page from what? Turn the page from Biden's economic policies? Turn the page from neoliberal policies? Definitely not. I mean, everything that she's put out there in terms of economic messaging makes it abundantly clear that she's going to continue on with neoliberal economic policies. But I don't know, John. I think this is the area where I'm actually the most disappointed in Harris's messaging. I want her to go back to talking about building more houses, passing laws that prevent private equity firms from buying up single-family homes. That's specific. These are things that would actually materially improve people's lives. That's what I wanted to talk about. What do you think?
Yeah, that just seems kind of empty. Like, that seemed a little bit more, and granted, we could listen to more, but that sounded more of like how people characterized the way she communicated, like right as she was launching her campaign. It's she's gonna say stuff, but it's not really gonna be anything. And I don't think that's generally how she's been as a candidate. But right there, it did feel like that. Like, I didn't draw anything out of that. That was just empty calories. I think, look, in her stump speech, when she's talking about, like the cost of different things, when she's talking about inflation and stuff like that, I think that that's better. She could focus on, like, the inflation report just came out. It's the lowest it's been in 4 years. I think talk about that. Tim Walz recently was talking about the economy very effectively. What she was just doing there is not it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There were other highlights of the interview that we're going to talk about in our members only bonus episode. So if you are a member, we'll see you there. tyt.com/join, or hit the join button if you're watching us on YouTube, so you can watch the rest of our conversation and watch the rest of the highlights of Harris's interview with Bret Baier. We'll see you there.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a young Turk.